Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is an unhaul video. So I did a fairly large one, I want to say in December or January, and those books ended up being tossed in with a bunch of other books that I was unhauling, that I had been accumulating over the course of the pandemic. And when all was said and done, I ended up donating like 100 books to the secondhand bookstore that helps to support our local library, which I thought was really nice. In donating them all at once, I ended up having like 4 or 5 boxes of books, which are heavy, in case anyone didn't know that I had to carry to the car, then carry out of the car to the bookstore, and it was just a lot. So I'm trying to make that not happen, and I have decided that I am going to take a capsule wardrobe-esque approach to my bookcases. So for the last two and a half years, I want to say, I have been embracing the capsule wardrobe life, which means that I keep a very minimal amount of clothing. Essentially what I do is, for each season, I have a reassessment of the pieces from the previous season. So I will look at the clothes that I have, and if there's anything that I don't like the fit of, I will donate it. If there's anything that my tastes have just changed and I've outgrown in that sense, I'll get rid of it. And if there's anything, absolutely anything that I have not worn for that entire season, then I donate it as well. So it really means that I have a pared down wardrobe, but they're all pieces that I'm really excited to own, really excited to wear, and give me joy, essentially. So I've decided to take the same approach to my bookcases, in a sense that each season I'm going to look through the books that I own and get rid of any books that I've read and know I won't read for a second time, any books that I just straight out didn't enjoy the first time I read it, books that have been moldering on my bookshelves for who knows how long and I just never got around to them. I'm gonna get rid of those, and any books that my taste might have just changed and so I don't think that I will read them. Stuff like that. Like, I'm just gonna be brutal. So it's just a case of me trying to make sure that my book collection is representative of the books that interest me and that I want to read or have read and really enjoyed and want to read a second time. I'm sure you understand at this point, but that was a really long intro, so why don't we just dive right in, okay? So the first book that I want to talk about is The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nomura. I'm not getting rid of this because I don't want to read it. I am very, very excited about this book, but this is a duplicate copy, so I already have one on my bookshelf. So I've spoken about the page one subscription box that I am obsessed with, and they actually sent me a copy of this not long after I had bought one for myself. Now, if you don't know what page one is, it is this subscription service where essentially you answer like a survey, you tell them the types of books you like, you don't like, you give them the link to your Goodreads account, and the booksellers themselves pick out books for you that they think you might enjoy, and you get like this Christmas gift essentially every month with maybe a couple bookmarks or page flags, little things like that. And they sent me this book, and it was so spot on because I am genuinely very interested in reading this book that is about the first female physician in the United States and her sister and their achievements in the 19th century. But like I said, I have a copy of it, so I don't need two. The great thing about page one is that when I let them know that I already had a copy of this book, they send you another one. So they've already sent me a replacement book for this, and they don't ask you to mail back the additional book. They tell you to spread the book karma and give it to someone else. So I'm going to pass this on for donation, but their customer service has just been phenomenal, so I really can't speak more highly of them. But they were just so spot on that I actually owned the book already. So there is that one. The next book is a similar situation. I've been doing page 1 for the last 6 to 8 months, I want to say, and they sent me The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and I already had a copy of this as well. I think my edition is actually a hardcover, so I have to decide whether I want to get rid of the hardcover of the paperback. I think I might be tempted to get rid of the hardcover, to be honest. But this book has been on my radar. I've heard so many good things about it. It really does seem like it would be a book that I enjoy. It's historical fiction set in the Victorian time period in England, and I just need to read it at some point, but I don't need 2 copies of it. So I want to thank page 1 for knowing me so well at this point that they have picked books that I already own, but again, just don't need 2 copies, so going to find a new home for this one as well. The next book is Sissy by Alison Pataki, and this is a historical fiction novel about Empress Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary. And when I bought this edition, I didn't realize that it was technically book 2 in a series. I think they might actually function as standalones as well, but the first book is The Accidental Empress, which is literally about Elizabeth becoming the Empress of Austria-Hungary. And I listened to the audiobook, but I wasn't in love with it. I actually read another book of Alison Pataki's, which was on Desiree Clary, and oh my god, I am blanking on the title of that book right now. But I really enjoyed that one, which is why I ended up picking up this one. I just ended up not being all that into the way the story of Empress Elizabeth was told. I didn't enjoy the way that book 1 ended, or how her relationship with the Emperor Franz Joseph was being portrayed in particular. So I just don't think I'm going to continue on with Alison Pataki. I would be interested in reading other books on Empress Elizabeth and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but probably not in this format. So that's where we're gonna go with that one. So next up is An Affair of Poison by Addie Thoroughly, which actually appeared in that Judge a Book by its cover video that I did with Katie from over at Katie Reads&Rants. If you have not watched that video, it is hilarious. It still makes me giggle when I watch it back, but literally I had Katie trying to guess what these books were about, just based purely on the cover, and this was one of them. It is actually a YA, and I would say that it is sort of an alternate universe take on historical fiction, and it's about the court of the Sun King, but there is this shadow society that assassinates the Sun King in France, and the main character is this young girl, I think she's 16 or 17, whose mother is in charge of the Shadow Society. So she has to kind of cope with knowing that her mother and her, like, cohort are murderers, and she also has the knowledge, so she's kind of grappling with that aspect of her identity, and also is trying to save France by working with the bastard son of the Sun King. And there's a lot going on. It was really entertaining when I read it, but I'm not a YA reader, and I don't anticipate myself reading it for a second time, so I'm gonna pass it along. I think someone will have a fun time with it. It's just I won't read it for a second time. So there you have it. I feel like the next book will be somewhat controversial, but it is Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jesse. And I read this book in February as one of the books that I wanted to get to in honor of Black History Month, so definitely check out that wrap-up if you're interested in knowing all of my thoughts. But I enjoyed the book, don't get me wrong, I did, but I enjoyed Homegoing more. And that is a book, Homegoing, that I still talk about, that I recommend to literally everyone. I can see myself rereading that book at some point. This one didn't resonate with me in the same way. I enjoyed it. I thought that this book handled addiction and depression in such a powerful way, and I thought the way that it depicts how it impacts the loved ones of those individuals who are battling those illnesses was really powerful. But I'm not someone who reads a ton of contemporary fiction, so there was that going against it for me, and there was a lot of talk about kind of science versus religion in the character of Gifty, who is a PhD candidate studying reward-seeking behaviors in mice to better understand addiction and depression, and her, like, being raised in this sort of evangelical religious family. And that conversation just didn't really interest me all that much, because I didn't think that it added all that much to this religion versus science debate that has been going on forever. So it was a great book. I think I gave it 4 stars, but I'm just not going to read it again, so I want to spread the love, essentially. The next book is one that I really didn't like, and that was Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi, and I also read this in February, and I didn't even give it a rating then, partly because I did not understand what happened in this 250-page book. Like, I couldn't follow the plot line. I don't even really know if there was a plot line. It was very hard to describe in February just after I read it. It's going to be even more difficult to describe it here and now, but it's essentially a story that is inspired by Hansel and Gretel, and the main characters are a mother and daughter, and the mother is from this country that may or may not exist. Like, they had a referendum which they basically chose to not have international relations with other countries, and her daughter gets sick, and while her daughter is recovering, she is telling her the story of her life in this country and of her friend who really loves her gingerbread, which is the same gingerbread recipe that she basically forces on everyone now. And then when her daughter recovers, she decides to try to find this friend, and there was just so much magical realism that it skewed more to, like, the fantastical side of things, which is not my cup of tea. I would say that the writing was really beautiful and interesting, and I know that there are a number of people who really love Helen Oyeyemi, but it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. So considering I just did not have a good response to this book, I think it's time to pass it along. The next one is The Autobiography of Henry VIII by Margaret George. And this is interesting to me in the way that it's written. It's historical fiction, but it's written in a way that it is Henry VIII writing his autobiography, and there are notes from his fool, Will Somers, and I think it does actually end when Henry VIII dies. This is a book that I've had on my bookshelf, and I'm just not drawn to it. I really haven't read much on Tudor England of late, although I'm going to attempt to read Alison Weir's The Lady Elizabeth this month. But as far as this book goes, I just don't have as much of a draw to it as the others. It's really beefy. It's like nearly 1,000 pages, which is quite a time commitment, and especially if you're not, like, super enthusiastic about a book, that's quite a bit to read. So I don't see myself picking this up anytime soon. So again, that's why this book is going. Oh boy, we have another controversial one, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. But this is a book I've had for a very long time. I think I bought this around the time that it was a Pulitzer. winner, and it has literally been on my nightstand for years because I've been trying to kind of shame myself into reading it. Like, you see it every day, it's right in front of your face, you're going to read it, right? Wrong! I have not picked it up, and I tried to put it on a TBR for the New Year's readathon, and I didn't get to it then either, and I don't know. I don't know what it is, because I feel like I would be interested in this. It's historical fiction, and it's set in World War II, and I believe one of the main characters is a blind woman or a blind girl, which I don't really think I've ever come across in fiction before, which is a draw for me. I would love to read about a character and see how that is approached in writing, but just have not picked it up. I don't know what else to say. I think at the end of the day, although it is World War II historical fiction, which I enjoy, there are other historical fictions on the same time period that have piqued my interest far more and that I'm much more likely to read. So this one is gonna go. So I don't know why the people in my neighborhood decide to do construction the exact moment that I turn on my camera. But if you hear any weird banging, that's what that noise is, and I sincerely apologize. But the next book is Alice Hoffman's The World That We Knew, which is one of those like Barnes & Noble signed editions of a book. And again, this is a World War II historical fiction that has been on my bookshelf and just has not been a huge lure to me recently. I have other books about World War II that I'm far more drawn to at this point, and honestly, I think part of me probably bought this because it was a signed copy, and since it was historical fiction in World War II, I was like, what's not to love? But I do think the main motive was probably the signature. So it does sound interesting. It is about this young Jewish girl whose mother is trying to send her away, and I think the rabbi's daughter who creates this golem to protect her, and it's about how their like fates become intertwined, and it does genuinely sound interesting, no lie. But again, it's just not a book that I have picked up, even contemplated putting on a TBR at this point, so I just think that I should pass it along and stick with the other World War II historical fictions that I love and am interested in at the moment. So, goodbye. The next book is House of Trelawny by Hannah Rothschild, and I can almost visualize the trip to Barnes & Noble's when I bought this. It was pre-pandemic, so it was probably 18 months to 2 years ago, and it was kind of picked up on a whim, and if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I just have no interest in this book at this point. It says here, witty and irreverent, House of Trelawny is a brilliant parody of old aristocratic families, recession Britain, and a ruthless American banker that asks how we are all connected and how we can find the purpose in changing a world, a tale of old money, new money, and no money. I like the idea of a parody, but again, this is a situation where I don't read a ton of contemporary fiction, and recession Britain is probably a little bit too close to home considering the economic state of the world for me to be interested in reading it at this point. I think it's kind of based on what happened in 2008. It could potentially be a great book. Parodies are really fun. I love witty commentary, but the way it's just, like, the book itself is just not a draw for me at this point. So it's gonna go. The next book is Sealskin by Sue Bristow, which I read in January, so I talk about this book in my January wrap-up. I liked the idea of this book more than I liked the execution of it. So it's set in Scotland, and is about the legend of the Selkie, which they're these creatures that are part seal, part woman, and so one night a year these seals come ashore and they can remove their skin, and then they're like these frolicking, beautiful women. And I'd first heard about this creature in the Faroe Islands, where they also have a similar myth, and so I was intrigued, genuinely. But like I said, I didn't enjoy the execution of it. It's historical fiction, but the world building aspect of it felt like it was lacking quite a bit. It really didn't give you a sense of place or atmosphere. It could have really been any isolated kind of seafaring village at any given time in history, I think. And there's also a rape in this book in the first like 10 to 20 pages, and I didn't like how it was handled in any way. It felt a little bit gratuitous, and then it's never really addressed. As far as like repercussions for the rapist, there really were none. They tried to make him out to be a character that is redeemed because he wants to give the Selkie a life and a family and all of that stuff in his world, and it fell flat. Like, I expected a little bit more of something written in the 21st century, and by a woman at that. So the overall idea behind the book, I think, had promise, but the execution of it just wasn't my cup of tea. Let's put it that way. And the last book is probably the most controversial of this haul, and it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Now, I have ranted about this book in multiple videos at this point, so if you want to hear that rant, it's in my January wrap-up. I go in. I really didn't enjoy it. And when I read it, most people were still saying really positive things about it. Now I think that it's been out a little bit longer. I'm seeing more mixed reviews. I know there's a video I think Cindy did, which is about the lack of diversity. Like, Addie LaRue lives for centuries and really doesn't have interactions with any characters of color except one. For me, the historical fiction aspect of this was lacking. Again, there was just like no world building. It felt really lazy on that front, and I just didn't enjoy it. It was a chore to finish this book. It felt too long, and I didn't think the characters were all that interesting, especially Addie. So at the end of the day, it is just a pass. I don't think V.E. Schwab is the author for me. My friend Liz, who recommended this, said that of any of V.E. Schwab's books, if there was one that I was going to like, it was going to be this one. So I think this is just an author that's not for me, and that's fine. And I love the fact that there are people who really enjoyed this book, and if you're one of them, I am so happy for you. But it just wasn't for me, and since that was the case, since I really didn't enjoy it, it needs to go. I need to make more room for books that I actually enjoy. So there you have it. So yeah, those are the books that I am unhauling for the spring. A good mix of books that I've read and had good, bad, or indifferent feelings about, some books that my tastes have just changed and moved in another direction, so I don't see myself reading them. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.